Auditor General, here's the question for you. I mean, there's a lot that is going on during this pandemic, and one of the key things that we're hearing is the question about real-time audits. Now, I am very much aware that during the Ebola crisis, your organization, your side, did some seminal work on real-time audits with very amazing results that came out of it. But now, please tell us, what are the challenges of these audits from an execution and from a reporting perspective? Everybody is very clear on what's good about them, but really, is it that easy to do?
Actually, it's not that difficult to do. And if your mind is set that it has to be done. When you're talking about auditing in this kind of medical, because I call them medical situations, wherein scared of each other. And in many of our SAIs, we are still doing field work, rather than online audit processes. You have to consider how that is going to affect those who are going to be on the field to go do the audit work. In the case of Ebola, it was not so difficult because we all know, based on the scientific evidence at the time, that before you could catch Ebola, you would have excluded some kind of symptoms. Unlike the situation we find ourselves now, wherein somebody may have COVID, but does not exhibit any symptom, and that person could easily transfer the disease to you. So we had to look at things like protecting our staff, the issue of PPEs in the size. In the moment we knew we had to continue with our audit work, because we didn't have all this long lockdown. We had just 2-3 day lockdowns. So it was business as usual. We had to carry on with our work. The office made sure that staff were informed of the precautions, because you have to cover your head that I have informed them of the precautions, and we provided them with masks. Because I think for now, that was the main thing. The issue of washing of hands was part of the precautions, part of the messaging that has been going around with COVID. So for those staff who were doing the audit and who are even doing other audits, we made sure that they had these PPEs, the mask PPEs, and we made sure that a reminder on a regular basis of what they are supposed to do. One of the key challenges in this is that some areas where you really want to go in and see what is going on, it's not easily accessible, because you're not sure whatever protection has been put in place there. So for the safety of the staff, you have to look at where you would go. So this may cause a bit of little bit of reduction in the level of depth you can go in doing a real-time audit in this kind of health kind of a situation. Another challenge that we face at that time, and we're facing now, and I'm sure others will also face that, is the issue of getting the attention of the auditees. When you go in to do audit in this kind of environment, and you're talking to key members of staff in the auditees team, who may also be involved in hands-on, probably not the medical side of fighting the disease, but in administration. That is when they will tell you, oh, I have a meeting to go to State House, or I'm busy having a conversation with my team, or we are strategizing here, or you're calling us to you're interfering with our work, or you know, all sorts of negative feedback coming from the audit team. Because many times, if you look at it, yes, they're inundated with work, but again, it's a distraction for us not to really focus on where we're supposed to focus. And that boils down again to the issue of, even when you may have gotten the attention, to get the kind of response you need from them to make a very good conclusion. So that it takes a little longer than you may have planned for it to take during the right time. So those are really the key challenges we have faced, and I'm sure if you're dealing with a health emergency, many of us will face these challenges.
But you know what, AG, one of the things that people keep talking about is the rigidness of the SAI when it comes to reporting, whereby SAIs have specific times where they're expected to report and specific times where they're not expected to report. Now, when you're doing a real-time audit, how do you manage that from not only a mandate perspective, but probably from an operational perspective? You have results and you want to give them out. How do you do that so that the results are not, they don't get too stale because of time?
So for the SAI Sierra Leone, we don't have that. We can report. We have the main Auditor's General report, which is due by the end of the year following the previous year. And then during the course of the year, our law allows us to issue reports as and when. So we don't have that situation. However, we report to the legislature, and it's up to the legislature to table them. Then they can become a public document. So we may have done our jobs, we may have submitted our reports to Parliament, but then, for example, the Ebola audit was submitted to Parliament in the November, we did the audit September to October 2014. It was submitted November 2014, and it was only a public document in February 2015 when the Parliament, laid it to the House, and then it became a public document. So there are things that are really not within control, even though you may have the rules to allow you to issue reports as and when you finalize them. But there are other situations, for example, other parties that may have an influence in not making it readily available.
Excellent. No, I'm getting some very wonderful information here. I think the audience needs to understand, or rather it should be put through to the audience, that the work that the Auditor General does not begin and end with the SAI itself. There are so many aspects of the state machinery that need to play in order for the work of the Auditor General's office to be effective. And one of them, as quietly mentioned by the AG, is the efficiency of Parliament in tabling, deliberating, discussing, and following up on some of the findings that they have. I mean, Macy, we were talking earlier, you have something that is burning in your heart, the question of IT. Maybe would you like to come in and get us up to speed with your idea? I'm sorry, you're muted, Macy.
My apologies, I had dogs barking at this end. Ed, I would rather focus my my question or my follow-up question to AG with regards to the reporting. Because when we talk about the real-time auditing and the real-time reporting, we always ask ourselves questions: what is the purpose of the real-time auditing? Is the purpose of the real-time auditing not to catch what is going wrong so that it can be corrected before the end of the program, deficiencies can be identified and caught before they get out of hand, which then requires the real-time reporting. So with the limitations that AG is pointing out, and I'm just thinking now about the pocket guide, is this the area that perhaps we need to focus on? And what would be the AG's sort of advice when we talk about the issue of real-time auditing versus real-time reporting to achieve the purposes that are intended for the real-time audits, for instance?
Okay, so let's look at the main difference between the real-time audits and our normal audits that we do with regards to the timing. And the situation we find ourselves. I know that yes, although there may be delays when it comes to actual reporting for the public, domain, the fact that you go in there and do audit work as monies are being spent, it sends a message to the user funds. I could remember that during the Ebola audit, the amount of, I would say, wastage that was in the system, which we found out during because we did 2 audits. The first one was the big one that, people spoke about. That first audit, by the time we finished that audit and we went on to do the second audit, we saw a drastic positive change in the whole dynamics of how monies were being spent and accounted for. So yes, we may be thinking that reporting-wise, not really dependent on us, but it's also the fact that you go in there as and when the thing is happening sends a message to many users of public funds that this is not business as usual. And it catches things quickly in such a way that you can stop or reduce wastage which may have been happening if you say go into the post audit, for example, the post financial statement audit or post compliance audit. Those things would have happened, gone by, and you're only talking about now going forward. But once you're on it, and the fact that in fact, many a time they tell my team, you're distracting us. Why are you people here? You're distracting us. And I know the issue of distracting us means that you're watching our business too much. We want to do our thing, business as usual. And it helps. I wouldn't say it's a 100% foolproof, but it helps in reducing wastage as far as possible.
Thank you very much, AG. Makes sense. Thanks, Ed.
That is beautiful. I like the way the Auditor General has put it through, Macy. I mean, look, I'm reminded so much of the landmark British common law case of Kingston Cotton Mill, whereby it was reported that the auditor is not a bloodhound, but rather a watchdog. And that environment whereby the Auditor General is seen to be working, it seems to be doing a lot to prevent or deter people from doing what they could have done if it was well known that there's no Auditor General watching over them. No, I think this is perfect. Thank you so much. I would like to pose my next question to you, AG, and this one is mostly focused on resources. They are always a common scarce commodity, especially in Africa, but during a disaster situation, the question of scarcity is even more exacerbated. Now, how has your office in this current pandemic managed to prioritize and repurpose its use of resources in a way that ensures that the office continues on its constitutional mandate and the people are kept safe?
Okay, so I'm talking now from our own personal experience.
Yeah, the current.
If you're operating, yes, if you're operating in an environment wherein on a normal basis, your money is hard to come by, then this is business as usual for you. But if you've been operating in an environment wherein resources, financial resources are regular and exactly what you need, and then there are cuts because of a pandemic, then it might be a bit of an issue. So for my office, with regards to financial resources, it hasn't been a problem because we're used to managing our monies. We're used to reprioritizing our monies. The only resource which has been, I would say, changed, the human resource, the staffing, because we have looked at key audits and said, okay, since we're going in to do this COVID audit and we need key staff to be part of the team, there are some audits that are not a priority, which will wait for some time. For example, if we were doing the QA, internal QA of the office, we removed staff from that QA team to work on the COVID audit because we believe it was more of a priority for the office. There were audits that were time-bound, that we removed staff from those that were not that time-bound into those audits so that at least for 2020, we know we will not have as many audits as we would normally do, but at least let us do a substantial amount of audits. So we have to look, it's a normal thing to look at what your priorities are. Yes, you have your operational plan, but it is not cast in stone. There are audits that can wait. So in this kind of a situation where probably your money is cut and you can't do everything, you look at it from that perspective. Again, if you're doing a real-time audit, as we're doing now, wherein it was not planned, but you have to do it, then you could look at audits that are not that much of a priority and move your team members to that. That is how, in fact, last year when we had the technical audit, that is kind of way we did it. We looked at audits that were not that much of a priority, not very risky audits, and we moved members of teams from those audits and let them wait for a while until we finish this one. So this is how we have been doing it. And if you're scarce, you've been managing staff for how many years, it becomes easier to know how to do it.
Excellent. Wonderful. As the Auditor General says, there are some audits that can wait. But let's get that straight. It's not to say those audits are not important. It's because we're using a risk-based audit approach, and that makes our methodology even stronger in the sense that we're focusing where the risk is, and in areas where the risk is not there, maybe we can slow down, park the bus a bit whilst we address the most immediate aspects. Thank you so much, AG, on that.
Ed?
Yes, Mason.
I would like to follow up on the question that you referred to earlier. I think it fits in quite well with this area. AG, obviously, when you have limited funding, it also impacts on limited resources like your equipment, your ICT equipment, and in disasters, it's also like in this instance, but in your case, you indicated that the lockdown was only for 2 days, so it was business as usual. However, in some countries, lockdown was much longer, and the staff had to be kept busy, and therefore access and network becomes essential, and also equipment. And as I said, if you have budget cuts, that impacts on your availability of equipment, because you get these things that break down unexpectedly, and if you don't have funding, then you are not able to replace them. How have you dealt with this issue during this period when you didn't have funding and you'd have needs of computer equipment or network that you couldn't provide to the staff?
Okay, so really it has been a long time when we haven't been in that situation, because now staff have access to laptops and we have a plan, IT plan, wherein those in charge quickly deal with these kind of situations. But if I could just think off the top of my head, the most practical way of doing this kind of thing, I would say that probably key members of the teams would be the ones that are imperative that they have these equipment if you cannot afford it, rather than give everybody, but key members of the audit teams should have these equipment. And when it comes to the internet and that kind of a situation, we have that now because, for example, communicating with our staff in the regions, even though they have all the laptops and all of that, it's difficult to communicate because of the internet situation. In FIT, even now in FIT, if it rains heavily, it's difficult. Internet will be on and off, you know. So instead of using the laptops and this kind of thing to communicate, we resorted to the telephone. It's not the best way to communicate, but at least you can talk to somebody and have a conversation on a particular matter. You know, even when the laptops, we can't have Zoom meetings with our staff in the regions because of that, and we've encouraged them, okay, if you don't have, if the modem we have given to you to use with your laptops is an issue because of the network, use the data on the phone and we will give you extra phone credit for you to be able to make Zoom calls, Zoom, you know, even though you're not as easy. So it's a catch-22 situation. In that situation, you will have to find a way of reducing probably how much paper you buy and spend money on buying credit for the key staff's telephones so you can contact them as and when required. So that's how I would say, off the top of my head, how we can deal with some of these situations going forward.
And just furthermore, and obviously the internet access is mostly driven by the country's internet access, because you can't expect your office to function and have internet when the country doesn't have, because you're dependent on what they sort of provide. And this COVID-19 has sort of, or is sort of dictating to our governments in the continent to improve the internet access so that we can reach out to other countries. Do you think the Auditors General have a role in influencing government to move that way?
Well, if you want to see that, if you remember that in our region, Auditors Generals are not the most liked individuals. In fact, I'm sure if some governments have the power, they will want to dissolve our offices. But I think that probably we could just add our voices to whoever are talking about that. Have a significant influence? I don't think so. You know, for us to get to that point, there'll be many others out there who are business people or who are closer to the leadership, who they will listen to, and will all benefit from that at the end of the day.
Interesting. Look,
thank you, Lara.
Three things that are coming out of this conversation, a very important conversation, because I mean, without the tools, the SAI cannot do its work. And if the tools are not up to standards, it will at some point affect the work that they're doing. But I'm picking up three key things here: innovation, resourcefulness, and collaboration. Innovation in the sense that we cannot just accept the situation that we're in and say, oh, look, we don't have Wi-Fi, we're not going to do anything. The Auditor General has been clear. We've had to come up with means and ways to make sure that we stick to the mandate and deliver it. Not so easy, very painful, could be avoided, but something has to happen. Being resourceful, she's saying. And the last one, I liked it. The question on collaboration, to say, you realize how far you can go yourself as an institution and know that, look, you cannot go it alone. You need to work with your partners, the friends of the Auditors Generals, the friends of accountability, the friends of transparency. Who are they? I hope those friends are actually listening to this, are going to get a chance to listen to this particular video and actually pick up and move forward and support the audit office in making sure that there is enough equipment, not only internally, but also nationally, for the work to be done. Thank you so much on that one, AG. My last question for the day. I evoke the Ebola pandemic once again, Auditor General. I apologize. But it's one area where we did learn a lot from you as a SAI. I mean, you were upheld as the beacon of transparency and accountability due to the audits which you bravely performed during this pandemic. But now, AG, what were the key lessons that you have employed from then, from that past experience in the current situation? And probably most importantly, because I know you've already touched on some of them, what is it that you have done differently this time around? Whereby you said, oh, we're not going to do that again. We've learned our lesson.
Okay, so one of the things that came out of that audit from citizens in general public, oh, we didn't know that this was what the law said, from users of public funds. Oh, we didn't know we were dealing with an emergency, so we didn't know, you know, that we had to do things this way. So when I realized that we're going to get into this thing and money is going to be spent, I issued out a press statement to all users of public funds about using monies on a public emergency. I directed everybody to the rules and regulations, so it was there in black and white.
Yes.
And I quietly reminded those who came around me that this is how things are supposed to be done. So when it came out that there were plans, I can use that word, to not use the rules and regulations, it was Disney that made a big noise about it, you know. So this time around, somebody's out there watching to make sure that things are done using the rules and regulations. Whatever rules and regulations are imposed, or whatever rules and regulations are going to be agreed upon, there are going to be rules and regulations that are imposed in place to manage, to guide how monies are being utilized. That is one. Another thing that came out, which I think is similar to the Ebola, it is good to strike the iron while it is hot. If you do not do that, I'm sorry, you are, I don't even know what adjective to use. But as an audit office, we also always aim to be, be important, even though we know how some people feel about us. But you need to stay relevant in whatever situation you find yourself. And I think it happened for Ebola and it's still happening now, and I'm sure going forward it will still happen. You need to strike the iron while it is hot. That's the second one. You need to be ready to quickly shift priorities. If we hadn't done it that time, we would not have understood how to do it this time round. So it was lessons learned then, which is guiding us now, to know how to quickly shift priorities so that you can have the kind of effect we really want to have. I think really those are the two key things. Inform users of the funds on time so that no excuses going forward. Make sure you go in while the iron is hot. It's always good. The end result is always better. And I would say, thirdly, let us always find a way of shifting priorities where we see it is absolutely necessary for us to do that. We're all scared of COVID. Nobody wants to get infected. However, you have to be smart on the ground to see. I've never heard of anybody in the agency that's dealing with the money having COVID. I've never heard of that. None of my staff have not had COVID because we are taking precautions. So I just got that.
Excellent. Wonderful.
AG, just as a last follow-up from my side, when we thought about putting a pocket guide together, we thought that issues of engagement are quite important. And one of the things that has come out is that some of the SAIs that are busy with the COVID-related audits currently, they were some of them were approached by government, some of them approached government. But for most of the SAIs in the region, we do know that they have limited funding. They depend on government for funding, and government even cuts their funding. So they are not even able to achieve all their mandates. So it becomes a challenge, and they are quite limited also in the areas that they can audit. When it comes to issues of engagement and approaching government for disaster, even for future disaster issues, what is your advice for the AGs out there that do not have the independence that they need in terms of, we talk about financial, in terms of administration, in terms of operational independence. And they therefore are not in a position to be bold enough to approach their governments on performing these disaster-related audits. How then should they approach this for them to, as you have advised now, to catch the iron hot and to reprioritize and to stay relevant? What is your advice to these AGs in our region and across the world?
So if we didn't have the laws in place, we may also have found ourselves in that situation. Because even now, you have to constantly be directing people to the act, the sections in the act that gives you the mandate to audit this, can do this kind of audit, that kind of audit, and that kind of audit. So I think the first thing is to get the laws right. Otherwise, it is going to be difficult to convince anybody. Secondly, when you are good at what you do, when you've made an impression as an institution, many times the donors out there will approach you. Where do you need to support you in these kind of situations? I know for Sierra Leone, for example, because it's public knowledge, I can talk about it. I know that when IMF was looking at how they were going to give emergency funding to Sierra Leone, I was invited to that meeting. I know that when the letter of commitment that was being agreed between the government and the IMF, when it was being signed up, one of the key things that was in that letter was the issue of the Office of the Auditor General's participation in the audit thing. And that would not have happened if the office had not been doing, at least to a large extent, a good job. That would not have happened. You need to make a difference. So sometimes we are shy to even talk to the press. We are shy to engage with the civil society. I don't know, for whatever reason. And yes, we know that sometimes they can be mischievous, but I am sure within our various jurisdictions, there are one or two who are honest and who are focused in accountability matters within our countries. And those kind of civil society institutions can take our matters forward. That could be a start, because if somebody makes some noise about these things, somebody will listen. It may not be forever, it will not be immediately, but eventually that will happen. If you do not have that support, if you do not have the laws, we will continue with finance audits, our financial statement audits. Even some sites don't even do financial statement audits because the auditors don't prepare financials in some countries. Many do, but a few don't do that. So it's a problem. We have to work on the laws. I think we have to find a way of getting the attention of powers that our leaders listen to. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we need to get to that level. Then we'll all benefit, under that. Because if our leaders, if our matters are brought up at the UN General Assembly meeting, for example, and not just a little committee meeting of the UN, if our matters are brought up at the AU General Assembly, somebody goes there and gives a talk, then our leaders will understand how important it is. If our donors who are anxious to support our countries find a way of talking to our leaders that, look, this institution is important for the governance that you're talking about, for good governance, it is important. When we get to that point, then it's easy to be easier for SAIs who are weak, SAIs who don't have all of this to really benefit. But from now, from what I'm seeing, it's going to be difficult. Even SAIs that have got to a level are being frustrated and being bullied by their leaders, even as we speak. So that's a difficult one, but we really need that high-level support. We need that. Then I can see that there will be a difference when that happens.
Thank you, AG.